information in South Florida. And I'm here this afternoon to introduce a new player on the Miami Community Newspaper channel here on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, and all those other great social media platforms. And that's my good friend, Gary Allen. Gary will be, hey, Gary, what's going on, brother?
Nothing much, man. Just here with you. We're going to be on Fridays at 5 on a new show called Mainstreet. We're going to bring a lot of celebrity people on, baseball people on, football people, political people. We're going to have some fun from 5 to 6. And then after that, it's
and people that maybe aren't from South Florida, but come here, performers, stand-up comedians, actors, etc. It should be a lot of fun. And you're the perfect person to host a show like that. And you know why I think that? Because you are a comedian. You're you do voices, you do impersonations, you toured as a stand-up comic for many, many years. And so tell us a little bit about Gary Allen, who you are.
Well, it's boring to me, but I was born in Pennsylvania. I mean, I'm not going to go through every year, but I was born in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Was that a natural birth or was it a C-section?
I have no idea. I'm adopted, so you'd have to speak to her, and I don't even think the birth mother's alive anymore. But I was found on the doorstep of a fire station. And that's how I got to be where I am. And my mother adopted me. And I had a great mom. I loved my mom. My mom had a great sense of humor. And I think that's where my stepmom, she's the only mother I ever knew. But I think that's where some of it comes from. My father's sense of humor was very, very dry. And I grew up with an uncle who was a mainstay on Miami Beach. His name was Tubby Boots.
Oh, my God. I remember Tubby. He was a mainstay on the beach. Sort of with that group of sort of Yiddish comedians.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about him and what it was like growing up with an uncle like that.
It was fabulous. I got to travel on the road with him when I got a little bit older. I didn't do it when I was in my early teens, but when I learned how to drive, because Tubby didn't know how to drive, he had a driver, but once in a while I wouldn't go out of state necessarily with him, but we'd go to all right, I'll give you an illustration. One Saturday morning, it's about 7:30. My mother calls me. I'm out mowing the lawn. It's February. Okay. It's on the weekends. We're still in school and I want to get the lawn mowed so I can sleep the rest of the day away. Cause that's what I did on the weekends and catch up to my studies. That's a joke. Anyway, so he calls and he says, "Hey, I'm going to go have lunch at the Fontainebleau Hotel. Do you want to join us today?" And the only reason he never took any of my other siblings was because I was the only one that really liked show business. I've always loved show business, although, as you know, Andy, we've talked about it. That isn't the direction I wanted to go with my life. I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps and work for the airlines as a pilot. But it's a long story. That didn't work out either for a lot of reasons. And thank God, because you could see me at the controls of a 747. I don't know that I would be too comfortable sitting in the back of that. I was a pretty good pilot in the Air Force. I did fly in the Air Force and I was pretty good, but something happened to my vision and that didn't allow me to go on to commercial flying. Well, anyway, he calls up and I said, "Yeah, I got to finish the lawn. It won't take me long." We had a big lawn, but I was halfway finished with it when he called. And, so I get ready, boom, we go. And we're driving down there and I don't even ask who we're having lunch with. I don't even ask because I figure, it's one of his cronies or somebody. And besides, I'm getting a free lunch at the Fontainebleau Hotel. And this is like 1967, 68. And the only big thing that the Fontainebleau, which is still a great hotel, was James Bond Goldfinger. Most people would remember that movie with Fontainebleau was at the very beginning of that. And I remember we go in, and again, I'm not asking. We go into the restaurant, and who is sitting there waiting to have lunch with my uncle? But Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr.
Wow.
That's the first time I got to meet Dean. I became friends with his son, Richie, who was there, he was a couple of years younger than me. And Richie and I had a long lasting friendship until he died a couple of years ago, which is a long story. When I got to Vegas, he was very, very helpful to me. But I've had the good pleasure of meeting a lot of people along the way. I never thought about becoming a comic. I always enjoyed funny voices and show business in the sense of looking at it from the peripheral, but I never really thought about it as far as being a career. I never did. I mean, I used to fly with my dad when he would go out on flights, and I could be with him on the Christmas holidays or during the summer. And I knew a DCA cockpit better than some of the pilots that flew it. And I could go through the checklist with the pilots and the flight engineer as much as anybody. And that was my career. That's where I wanted to go. I had no aspirations for show business or any kind of fame. I still don't really care for the fame part about it, although I'd love to find out what it's like sometime in my life. But no, I mean, I've had adulation and I've had people that have enjoyed what I do, but it's not the direction I wanted to go in. But when I got out of the Air Force, again, something happened with my eyes that prevented me from moving forward in that direction. So I kind of wandered around for a while trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I was at George Washington University finishing out there, and I was going to transfer down to the U, which I've loved the U since I was a child, and I still do to this very day. And a friend of mine who I met while I was in the Air Force was studying radio and television and journalism. And journalism was my major, but I never thought about the broadcasting side of it, not with this face anyway. And lo and behold, I got involved with the college radio station. I got an internship at, and you can point it out if you want, at that building right behind you there at WINZ and Zeta 4. And then I eventually went over to WIO. Yeah, that was the building. 16th and 17th floor, I believe, or maybe it was the 17th and 18th floor.
Yeah, that big tower on top of that picture was the tower of WINZ and the FM partner. I forgot the
Zeta 4.
Zeta 4, right.
Zeta 4. And then I went over to WIOD because my uncle knew Larry King, and I was looking for an in at a radio station, and I started getting interested in talk radio. And that's when I was a board op, swept the floors, you name it. And I did 12 at night till 6 in the morning with Larry for a number of years. And he and I would often go to have breakfast. You know, Larry, you know, he was hardly ever asleep. And he was. Did you
ever loan him $50?
Well, not $50, but $10. I did get that back when I moved to Los Angeles. He took me to lunch at a delicatessen right on Fairfax Avenue, and which is right across the street from where we used to play softball. The improv team called the House of David for a lot of reasons, because we were all Jews. And one of my good friends who lives in Fort Lauderdale, Will Schreiner, played on the team as well. And but no, show business was not. But I got interested in radio, and I loved it. And Larry said to me one morning, he said, you know, you're going to end up being a talk show host. Forget the music stuff. He said, you have a natural inquisitive nature. You read a lot. You enjoy people, but you're going to end up being a talk show host. Well, you know, I walked away from all that, and I went to LA to see if I could become an actor. And I was somewhat successful, thanks to Stephen Boschko and Robin Williams and a few others, Bud Friedman, who owned the Improv.
But you let's talk about that for a second. So
yeah,
you were a touring stand-up, correct?
Well, I was eventually, not in my early part of my career, but later.
Whenever, but what was that like? What was that like touring? Playing?
I wasn't a touring comic like people are now. Going from comedy club to comedy club. I toured with Engelbert and Tom Jones and Michael Bublé as their opening act from once in a while here and there, along with a lot of other comedians who did it too. Jay Leno did it. Gary Shandling did it. A lot of people opened for these guys over the years. But yeah, I did that. But I didn't go to comedy club to comedy club. I primarily started out in Fort Lauderdale, which I stunk at, but I went to LA and I got better, and I became an MC at the Improv along with Howard Allen. So when Steve Allen would come to the club, he'd always say to Bud, are my two sons here, Gary and Howard? And all three of us spelled our names completely different. I'm A-L-A-N. Howard is A-L-L-A-N, and Steve was A-L-L-E-N. But he'd bring Jane and everything, and I would always question Steve about a show that he had on the air. I don't know if the audience would remember it, a Meeting of the Minds, which was a panel show. They'd sit around a table with people of history that would have no relevance to ever know each other, and they discuss history. And I loved that show, and I wish I could afford all the copies of the show, but it'll cost you close to $1 million to own all of that. But I toured, and I have friends of mine who still tour to this day, and I know what that's like. And I traveled on the road with Tubby. when he would tour around all over New England and the United States and stuff. And I'd be on tour dates with him. And I worked with him also on the SS Emerald Seas, where I worked for 2.5 years as part of the crew staff. So yeah, I guess I could say I was a touring comic, but I didn't go from town to town to town like a buddy of mine who I want to get on the show, Mark Riccondanda, who is also a writer for SNL, who's touring. He's, matter of fact, in Orlando now, and he's going to be down in the Keys coming this weekend, I think.
Wow. But what is that? Your experience in Southern California at the Improv? I mean, there must have been a lot of big name comics that came through those doors. Any great stories you want to share with us?
Let me just say this. I watched a lot of comics come and go. People at first that you think, well, they're not really they're not gonna make it, and then they do. And then some that burn out fast. They come in, they're hot, they're good, and they burn fast. Let me just say this. LA is a place that if you don't have your act together, and I normally would use another word that begins with the word S, but if you don't have your act together, when you get to LA, that's no place to do it. They will eat you alive. Las Vegas will eat you alive. They don't have time for any nonsense. They have time for fun once you get there, but they don't have any time for nonsense. I got my break because of Stephen Boschkow being one of my instructors. Before I went to LA, I went up to Carnegie Mellon to visit a friend, and I was lucky enough to get an audition, and I got accepted, and I studied there for about 1.5 years in Pittsburgh. And when I went to LA, Boschkow was doing LA Law. He was also doing eventually Hill Street Blues. And he had all the connections for me, and he liked me. And his wife, Barbara Bossum, who was also on Hill Street Blues, that was a cast to get along with. But getting back to your original question, I can remember nights when Billy Crystal or Robin Williams would come on the stage. And even if there were 10 comics booked after Robin Williams was supposed to be on, they all went home because Robin Williams would take the atmosphere out of the room.
Yeah, he took all the air. He would take all the air out of the room, right?
He would take everything out. Billy Crystal would do the same thing. Carol Leifer, who is a head writer for Jerry Seinfeld on Seinfeld, she was a very good comic. I watched a lot of people come and go. Glenn Hirsch, who's a very dear friend of mine, I watched him the night that he came in from doing the Tonight Show, and he had a bottle of champagne that Johnny Carson gave him, and he shared it with everybody. I'm going to try to get Glenn on this show too, because Glenn did the comedy route. He did the cruise ships the same as a lot of people do. But yeah, I mean, I watched some people come and go. I watched some people bomb. And listen, let me tell you something. If you're a comic, a stand-up comic, and you're doing a set a night, and maybe you're at the Improv doing a little bit, and then you go up to the comic strip, or you go to the candy store, or you go wherever you want to go in LA, you're going to bomb. And not every joke works well. There used to be an old adage. An adage that I learned from Jay Leno, because I've known Jay since God only knows I was about 9 or 10 years old. But if you're clean, you're working everywhere. If you're dirty, you're not working everywhere. So I like an intellectual comic. I don't like dirty comics, men or women. If you throw something in there from time to time, okay, fine. But I like somebody who is intellectual, who has some smarts, who goes a little bit deeper. It's like the interviews, like you and I. If it wasn't for Wanda Miles, you and I would have never met. And we became instant friends. We don't write to each other. We don't talk to each other, but we're friends. But, you know, I mean, I like people who have an intellect, that have something to offer other than just saying curse words to hear themselves talk. And so a lot of comedy has really turned me off over the years as far as that's concerned. But I've seen comics go and go. Now, one story that I can tell you, and this is a true story. I was at the Improv one afternoon, and I just got through auditioning for the Groundlings for the 3rd time. And by the way, for those of you who don't know what the Groundlings are, you've all heard of the Second City. Well, the Groundlings are equivalent of that in Los Angeles. Many of the characters that you see on Saturday Night Live have come from the Groundlings. Phil Hartman was one of my instructors at the Groundlings. In one of my classes was Kevin Costner, Bob Saget, Barbie Benton, Nick DeTuro. We all studied together. I went there for my radio and my stand-up. I didn't go there so much to be an actor because I knew, you know, acting wasn't really for me per se. as far as really making a living at it. I knew that. Okay, I'm not a good actor. And when you look like this, it doesn't go over very well anyway. I don't have that look, you know. I mean, let's put it this way. The best part of me is, well, never mind. Anyway, but I was sitting there one day and I was having lunch with Bud Friedman, and Bud and I are just kibitzing back because Bud loves sports. And plus, Bud used to be in advertising, in the advertising business at Ogilvy and Mather in New York. And my wife at the time, Gracie, the only reason she married me, by the way, was because she wanted the name Gracie Allen. That's a funny bit how we met, too. She was a marketing director for them, and she was absolutely brilliant at it. She started out in Chicago. But we're sitting there talking about advertising and everything else like that. And I'm saying, I'm tired of auditioning for the Groundlings. I'm not getting anywhere. I'm still getting television gigs here and there, blah, blah, blah. 5 and under work, which is what they call a co-star now. And Robin walks in, and he walks around, he comes up to the table and he says, "Hey guys." And we all said, "Hey, Robin." And he says, so I'm sitting there and I'm sulking a little bit too. And I have my head down and I'm eating my sandwich. And he says, "What's wrong with him?" And Bud says, "He auditioned for the Groundlings again, and he doesn't think he made it." He said, "How many times is this, Gary?" And I said, "This is number 3. And I said, "I just can't get through the political thing of getting in there. You know, I show them what I can do. I do all these impressions. I can do characters and stuff like that, but it just doesn't seem to get over." And he said, "Well, I warned you how political it is there. And it is very political. Now you can't even be a member of the Groundlings unless you already have a TV show on the air, or you did have a TV show on the air." That's how big it's gotten as compared to when I was there, because, some people could take the beginning classes, a salesman, just to learn how to think on your feet, which is good. And improvisation is a wonderful tool to have in your tool belt. And he turns to Bud and he says, "Hey, can I go up to your office and make a phone call?" Which the office was upstairs. And he comes back down about 20 minutes later and hands me a piece of paper. He said, "Call this guy, you're in." I said, "I'm in what?" He said, "You're in with the Groundlings." He said, "I told these idiots how talented you are, and they're idiots for not taking you. And so you're in. You're not in the troupe, but you're in the advanced class," which is where Costner and Saget and everybody were part of. And I took some classes there, and then I became part of the troupe for a while. And then I don't know, I just suddenly got tired of it. And I said, my wife makes great money. I'm tired of not making money, and she's the breadwinner, and I feel kind of cheesy about all that. And so I said to Bud one day, I said, "What am I going to do?" He said, "Well, go back to school." He said, "You have all this background, go into advertising." So I went back to UCLA. I went to UCLA and applied for the copywriting, which was an extension class. I wasn't going to get a degree out of it, but, I learned how to do, and then I tried to get into the advertising agency business, and I did some work, but I never really got in with anybody particular, but I still stayed doing voiceover work and cartoons and stuff, which was also fun to do.
Let's talk about that for a second. So,
sure.
So Tommy, I met Gary through Wanda Miles, Wanda, was on WLRN for many, many years. I met him through Wanda. And Wanda said to me, and a friend of mine, Rick Del Vecchio, said to me, "This guy, Gary Allen, looks a little like Jay Leno." Look at him. Doesn't he look a little like Jay Leno? Yeah. Okay.
First of all, let me just say this. I'll give you a car. All right. Yeah.
He looks like Jay Leno, and he does great voices. So on my radio show, The Man Cave, 1210 The Man, I would have Gary call in and do voices. And the best story I could tell about that was, we have a lady you'll see on some of these shows here at Miami Community News. She is the sexiest barber in South Florida. She's called the Blonde Barber.
Oh, yeah.
And Aisha is her name. And the Blonde Barber was in on her birthday to cut my hair on the air. Yeah. And during the course of doing that, Gary called in as Sylvester Stallone to wish her a happy birthday and beg her for a date.
Yeah.
And it went so well that after the show, Aisha, the Blonde Barber, said to me, "Hey, was that really Sylvester Stallone? Is he really going to take me out on a date?" and I got a kick out of it. Some of Gary's impressions are better than others.
Yes.
But I thought Gary I'd like to hear,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, and anybody watching now or will catch this later here at Miami Community
Hear me
Newspaper.
now. You listen to me next week.
Yeah, well, let's do this. Let's do this.
Yeah.
I'd like for you to do 3 imitations. Let's say 3 that you believe are 3 of your better ones.
Okay.
And then I'd like to maybe ask people that are watching in live, or maybe later they can comment on which one they think is the best. So I'll leave it up to you what 3 those are. I know you normally I ask you for a certain one, but in this case, I'm going to have you be the person that chooses. So could be any of them. You start with what you want.
It's funny when you say that, 3 of your best or your favorites. And we talked about this earlier in the day. The first one that I ever did in my life was John F. Kennedy, which had to do with the Von Meter albums. For those of you that may not be old enough to remember, but there was a guy out named Von Meter. He put out these First Family albums. And I think it was the first time that anybody had ever, parodied the First Family, and it was the Kennedys. And
That's got a great album, by the way.
Oh, it is. I somewhere in my collection, I don't have a lot of albums left, mostly CDs, but I started to do a John F. Kennedy here. And let me just say this, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, but bring your wife over at the hot tub party for me. I'll tell you that right now. And by the way, I did that in front of Bobby Jr., Robert Kennedy's son, and he thought it was funny as all get out. I've had the pleasure of doing some of these impressions in front of the actual celebrities like Clinton and stuff, and I didn't know how he was going to react. And I didn't know how Hillary was going to react, but they both loved it. And Hillary, by the way, she doesn't have much of a personality outwardly, but she's a really nice lady. But she thought I did a great job. And he was like, "Hey, well, I'll tell you what, those are some funny impersonations of me. Do I really sound like that?" And I said, "Yeah." My buddy was his chief advance. Which, by the way, if I hadn't come home.
I love your Bill Clinton, by the way. I love the Bill Clinton.
Yeah, I have fun with that one. If I hadn't come home to take care of my mom and dad in 93 until they passed away, for 10 years I was home, I would have gone to work for him. I would have been in the White House for the second time in my life. So, that working there. But Clinton, and then, of course, oh, it's Mickey Mouse. Hey, boys and girls, this is Mickey Mouse. Oh, hey, Pluto, what are you doing? And then there's others that I've done over the years.
So far we've heard John F. Kennedy.
Yeah.
We heard Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
We got a little Mickey Mouse there. Could you do a little raunchy Mickey Mouse for me?
Oh, hey. Oh, you know what Mickey's favorite thing to do at Christmas is give Minnie a little Mickey. Oh boy. Oh boy, hello. Yeah,
I think on the Romberg and Korge show for Onside Radio, we might have to have deprivated Mickey come on periodically.
Yeah, but you know what? You gotta get Elmo in there. You gotta have Elmo. Elmo. I did a bit for some friends of mine in North Carolina. Ugh. As much as I don't hate North Carolina, I just don't like NC. I just like NC. But they had me do, Elmo drunk 30 years after Sesame Street. And that was what, Kermit the Frog was a heroin addict, and I did all this stuff. Here's one. A friend of mine who used to be on radio down there in Miami, and when Reagan died, and I used to love to do my Reagan impression, and I still do to a certain extent. And they wanted to do something right after Reagan died. And I said, no. Let's wait a couple of weeks and I'll do reference to the man. I didn't like him as a president, but in all due reference, I'll tell you the truth. I'll take Reagan back now any day compared to the clown we got there now in the White House.
Yeah, well, I loved when you'll recall on our radio show when you called in as the ghost of Ronald Reagan to thank Grant Miller for becoming a Republican.
Well, let me say this, my fellow Americans. Grant Miller is what I would call an extended Republican. He's always trying to extend himself and nobody really cares. And it's just one of those things. And well, for years people would say, Ronnie, how do you know you're in heaven? And I used to say, well, as long as mommy's not here, I'm in heaven. And then, well, the bitch had to go and die. And well, she's up here now and I can't get rid of her. Errol Flynn is chasing after her and this one is. And I even tried to pawn her off on Tricky Dick Nixon and he wants nothing to do with her.
Well, what would
by the way, I lived in a building in Chicago, 535 North Michigan Avenue, where she grew up.
What would Nixon say about that?
I worked for Nixon, so I was just pretty. Let me just say this, and I'm going to give you the exact speech he said to me just before he left Air Force One in California, the day that he resigned. We were sitting there, and he was talking to everybody who was connected with Air Force One at the 89th Airlift Wing, the Presidential Corps Squadron, and he said, "Let me just say this, Gary. Republicans and Democrats, we're all full of. I'm cleaning it up. We're all full of crap. We'll tell you what you want to hear to get us elected, and then we do as we damn well please once we get in. And by the way, I like you. It's too bad the Colts weren't better for me, but oh well." And the only reason I ended up with Nixon was because of my brother Michael. He loved football.
How about live? Because we only have a few minutes left. What? How about giving me a little Arnold? I love your Arnold.
We got a full half hour to go.
Okay, keep going. Keep going.
I got to fuel up here. First of all, let me just tell you now, you hear me now, you listen to me next week. First of all, I'm going over to the Sheraton Hotel. I love the maid service. You know what I mean? It's great for my libido. You know what I'm saying here? You hear me now, listen to me tomorrow. I'm trying to get a hold of Jeff Garcia. Jeff Garcia is the greatest marketing genius for politicians this side of Opalaka.
How about is that a tumor on your neck? I see, Arnold.
That is not a tumor. It is a red chair. I'll tell you this right now. It is not a tumor. There's a story behind that. He tried to sue somebody for doing impersonations of him. Bette Midler tried to sue somebody for doing her in the lookalike. There are lookalikes, and in the lookalike world. And
tell us about your impersonations here in South Florida. Probably, I imagine no one that sees this show may know that you at one time were doing lots of impersonations on radio in South Florida.
On Power 96 and Y100, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, back in the day.
Yeah.
How did that all come about?
I met Don Cox on the radio. Hey, this is Cox on the radio. Hey, how's it going, everybody? And he put me on the air from time to time when we do things. He had a guy who did it for him on a regular basis. I forget his name. He lives in LA now. But I would come on and I would do them from time to time for him. But I also did them for other commercials back in the day when advertisers weren't afraid to use somebody for advertising purposes. And now they are. I don't know why, or they just don't think it's funny. One or the other. But I did my share of them. I did cartoons and everything in LA. Doing character voices, and they'd want an older Jewish fella. Hey, such a deal! I want to tell you, it's great. So, as a matter of fact, somebody asked me once, what's the average age of a Floridian? I said deceased. Back in the day, and they also said, I said, I'll show you how old it is. One time, I ordered a glass of water in Miami. I turned around, came back, and there was a set of teeth in it. So
that could happen back in the day, especially on Miami Beach. So just a couple more minutes left here. We're going to have to break, but I want to talk about Mainstreet and what Mainstreet's going to be, because it's going to be sort of a new type of show here for Miami Community News. We're used to delivering a lot of news and sports, but this is going to be really entertainment focused, right? With news, et cetera. Talk about that.
I'm going to try to get on. I put out some calls in the last couple of days, and of course, people are getting ready for the holidays. But it's going to be, I'm going to try to get as many of my friends on and their friends. And I also know a number of agents who book some of the old time stars. I'm going to call a friend of mine who handles Loretta Swit and Donnie Most and people like that. And we're going to get them on and talk about their lives and their careers. And we're also going to give out some advice. I have a gentleman who is going to come on, Bob Sachs. He used to be one of the head honchos at ESPN. He's going to come on. I also have Ray Abruzzo, who I'm waiting to hear back from. I'm sure he will come on. Will Schreiner has told me this afternoon that he doesn't know what his schedule is for January when we do begin Mainstreet, because we're not going to be on during the holidays because next Friday is Christmas. It's going to be show business oriented. We're also going to do some sports. We'll have some political people on. I'd love to get Donna Shalala on, but I don't know if that's going to really be possible. And then we're going to have some local people like Dave Lamont. I'm going to get a hold of Dave and Ed Berliner, people that are in the Miami community. Maybe Kelly Craig will come on. I don't know. Kelly and I don't know each other that well, only through Facebook. But, maybe get some people on that the people don't get the chance to talk to or see, and find out about, why did they do what they do? I mean, why did Andy Korge get into the radio business to begin with? Why did someone want to become a sports anchor or a news anchor? Brian Baldinger from the NFL Network, he and I did Arena Football League games together. I was a sideline reporter for a while, and and just entertain people, because I know that most of the shows on there have local personalities, local business people, which is wonderful, and local politicians and people that are involved in the Miami community, and that's great. But I also want to bring something new. And with you, thank you for allowing me to have this platform with you in the afternoons. And thanks to the Miller brothers. I feel like I'm talking about a beer company, or the Smith.
Telling them they should have a show called Miller Time on the air.
They should. They really should. I don't know which one would get a word in edgewise, because Grant is, hey, this is Grant Miller, everybody, and I'm here. But we're going to try to entertain people. We're going to inform you. We're going to entertain you. And if we don't do that, then you're going to turn away.
Well, in the days of COVID, 2020 has been a tough year. Yes. We all need something a little bit of something to laugh about now and then. And Gary Allen, you have provided me with lots of laughter especially over the last year since we've started to work together. So I'm looking forward to doing this show with you every Friday, starting whatever that day is, that first Friday after
January 9th, January 8th, I believe is when it is.
That's correct. January 8th, we'll be starting Mainstreet right here at Miami Community Newspapers, and there'll be guests. There'll be all sorts of great people that we'll be talking to and bringing a little bit of entertainment, hopefully a little more joy as we get out of this pandemic.
And that's the other thing. Once I come home, because I'm obviously living somewhere else other than Miami. And once I can come home, I'll be sitting there next to you doing the show. And that I look forward to very much, to come home. It's been 20 plus years since I lived in South Florida. And I want to come home. It's time. I mean, I've traveled the world. I've been all over the world. I've traveled everywhere. Huh?
You consider South Florida your home?
I always have. Well, there's one other place that I really kind of consider kind of my secondary home, and that's Chicago. I worked in the political arena up there for the Attorney General, and had it not been for the fact he didn't win the governorship, I came home and took care of my mom and dad. But since then, since 1999, I've been gone, and I left here. I sold my place up in Dania. I had a condominium up there, and things for me financially weren't great. I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you. But the one thing I want to come home, because a lot of my family, Rick Del Vecchio, as you know, is like a big brother to me. I also have another guy who I've lost friendship with, but I want to build that back up. And you know what? And I'm not ashamed to say this. I'm not a great looking guy, but I'd love to meet a young woman to share my life with. I mean, I just, that's the sad part about where I live in Palm.
It could be a Dateline show. It could be a dating show for you.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. No, not with this face. Not with this face.
Trolling the waters, man.
Hey, I'll tell you what right now. Hey, it's time. I had a girl actually tell me up here once, I was in my black suit, my black shirt, and I did look like a guy from Vegas. And she said, yeah, you're a Vegas guy. Yeah, you're a Vegas guy. And I'm up here in Palm Bay. For those of you that don't know anything about Palm Bay is a great place to live if you're in the midst of dying. Okay. I mean, the all-night diner closes at 12 noon. They don't have a town drunk. Everybody takes turns. And the local hooker is really never mind. Anyway, the bottom line is I'm so lucky to have friends in and out of the business that have been friends of mine for years. My very dear friend Rick Denise, who I hope to rekindle my friendship with him. I blew that because of politics. But my nephew Ricky Denise is over at Gray and Robinson. I have April Denise. She's a school teacher. So I have a lot of family down there. But I left there real quick because during that 10-year period, I took care of my mom and dad. I lost 75% of my friends and family that are all in heaven. I always say this jokingly, but it's the truth. I have more people up in heaven than I do on earth. I'm at that age, where that happens. But yeah, I'd love to meet somebody when I get down there. I don't care if she has a seeing eye dog. It's okay by me. It's okay as long as the dog loves me. I don't care. But yeah, I'm looking forward to coming home. And that. You know how long I've been trying to get home, but COVID has prevented some of it. And it looks like the tide may be turning for me in that direction.
Well, listen, we got to run.
Where?
Gary Allen, thanks so much.
What do you mean? We're not done.
No, we're done because we're good. Brett Romberg is about to walk in and we're going on the air in less than 15 minutes. So we got to get ready. But
we do an hour.
Yes. Well, not an hour today, my friend. So listen, Mainstreet starts January 8th right here at Miami Community News.
Yes,
Gary
from 5 to 6.
Your host. I'm just coming along for the ride, man. That's all I'm doing.
And we'll be on from 5 to 6, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
5 to 6. And we'll see you then. Yeah. And hopefully lots of great people that will be joining us on Gary and I on that show. Yeah. Celebrities.
And he's not along for the ride. He's not along just for the ride. He's going to be a very important part of the show because he is Andy Korge. And by the way, I just want to say thank you to the Miller brothers for giving me and you this platform because I think it's going to be an exciting time. And there's a lot of other things that are going on that we're going to be pursuing and moving forward with. But also I want to thank Tommy, my producer, for that great logo that he created.
He's got his Yeti hat on today. We're all sporting hats. We decided from now on as a hat, especially when you have hair like this, you gotta wear that hat.
Okay, one last question though. One last question before you go, because Brent isn't in there yet. I know you went to Florida.
I did.
I know you love your Gators.
I do.
I'm sorry. Everybody has a cross to bear.
Yes, we do.
But what do you think the final score will be tomorrow night when it's all said and done?
100-0.
No, Alabama's not going to kill them that bad.
No, I mean Florida. What do you mean? I always think the Gators are going to win 100-0. No, seriously, it was started as a 14-point spread. Yeah. It's now up 17 points. I think that says it all. The money's on Alabama. They'll probably win by the Gator defense is not very good, so Alabama's probably going to win by 3, maybe even 4 touchdowns.
Here's a question for Tommy. Do we know where our Canes are going in a bowl game at all?
Yeah, it looks like the Cheez-It Bowl against up in Orlando against Oklahoma State. That's the prediction.
The Cheez-It Bowl?
Cheez-It, how appropriate.
It used to be the what do they call it? The
Outback Bowl?
No, the camping ground. Or
Camping World Bowl.
Yeah,
Let's just go back to the 5 big bowl games on New Year's Day and cut this out. The Seesaw Bowl, and here they are, North Carolina State against Eastern Mississippi. And the coach from Mississippi is 0-59. His excuse is you can't win them all. I'm telling you right now, It's like, oh, God almighty. The Cheez-It Bowl.
Romberg's texting me right now. He goes, please tell me we have drinks. I answer yes. And he goes, thank you, Jesus.
We'll be back on the air in less
than why don't we just stay on until he gets there?
We can't do it. I'm getting him off the air. We gotta go. We'll be back on with Romberg and Korge in less than 20 minutes.
Yeah, right.
Gary Allen, Mainstreet starts January 8th here at Miami Community News.
It's also Andy Korge. He keeps forgetting himself.
And Andy Korge, yes. Thanks, Gary Allen.
Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy New Year. Hanukkah's now officially over with, but such a deal.
Whatever. Kwanzaa, you name it.
Oh,
and
the Cheez-It Bowl.
You, my friend Gary Allen will speak over the weekend, and I'll see you on Monday.
The Cheez-It Bowl.